Hello, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, introduction and conclusion का importance तो everybody knows because it is the first thing and the last thing that the examiner reads. But all the more it is important because it shows whether you have understood the topic or not. If you're not able to hit the demand in the introduction, or if you're not able to conclude your answer well, then even if you have the knowledge about a topic or a question, you might not fetch enough marks in it. So introduction and conclusion are like the packaging that you need for your answer. So I will just try to showcase what type of templates I used for my introduction and conclusion. It is something that I did. It is not universal. So whatever you think works for you, try to gather that from this session. This is not the universal thing that you have to follow. But again, according to your own wisdom, try to fetch more marks by uh, looking at this presentation if it's possible. Let's start with introduction only. Just a second. So first of all, introduction, it sets the tone of your answer. It is really important. Uh, it is like the ID card of your question. It comprehensively summarizes your understanding of the question, right? So this shows your ability to understand and express your views in a very small and crux way. So I think what introduction does is that it shows that you have understood the question, and it also generates the curiosity in the examiner whether we will be able to address what we have written in our introduction or not. So दो ही काम है introduction के. First, to let the examiner know that I've understood, and second, to tell him or her that in the upcoming part of the question I will be addressing these factors, right? So a lot of times history optional questions are becoming very cryptic, and you have to decipher the meaning of the question. And once you decipher the core demand of the question and you write it in the introduction, the examiner might not even have to read your whole answer. So, like in this year 2025, there was a question related to Harappan civilization, that do you think that Harappans were artistic people or not? The question was not framed in such a way. It was framed in a way that examiner wanted you to say that Harappans were not artistic people. So, firstly, you had to decipher the question. Secondly, you had to go against the narrative of the colonial time that Harappans were not creative, right? And this is something that you have to do in introduction only. So, in my introduction, I had written that this is a colonial perspective, and it showcases a biased view of the historians, but the reality lays somewhere else. This was my introduction to the Harappan question. Now, this shows that I have understood the demand of the question. And secondly, I have shown the examiner that in the upcoming part of the answer, I will be telling you how Harappans were artistic. So sometimes you have to go against the question and demand and address the demand in the introduction itself. So I will be telling you some of the templates that I had already prepared. In history optional, you barely have time to think, let alone, think of a different template. So I knew I had less time, so because of that, I had already made templates 5 to 6 कि कोई भी question आएगा, I will write this template and make sure that I save my time, and also uh, make sure कि मेरे एक जैसे answers नहीं हो रहे हैं. I'm not writing very factual answers. Sometimes I'm giving different introduction. Sometimes I'm giving factual. Sometimes I'm giving analytical introduction. So it all depends on making a very good mixture of all these introduction, right? So the first type of introduction is the contextual introduction. अगर कोई भी question पूछ रहा है about a very broad idea or very broad phenomena, you have to tell the examiner कि this happened in the context of this. If I'll take an example, like if the examiner is asking about the nature of Mughal state, uh, then we will tell them कि the whole premise of nature of Mughal state is based on the fact that a lot of historians they have not been able to come on a conclusion of how the nature of Mughal state was, and hence it's a debatable question. The fact that it's a debatable question, ये आप context provide कर देते हो, right? So in the contextual introduction, you give a broad understanding either of the whole era, or you summarize the socio-political economic scenario which was going in that era. So this was something that I did. I will take an example. For example, this was the question of world history, that Treaty of San Stefano, which practically decreed the dissolution of Ottoman Empire. Basically, question पूछ रहा है about the Eastern question, and but the thing is कि वो the question is very difficult to decipher. बहुत लंबे questions होते हैं, statement based questions होते हैं, but basically it is asking about Eastern question. When I know that it is Eastern question that is being asked, so I will tell them the context that the Eastern question had been a complex political, economic, religious, and ethnic contestation of varied state who had different interests in the region. So I have just provided the examiner कि this was happening in that era. Eastern question क्या था, किस बारे में था, and I have just provided the examiner an understanding कि there were a lot of factors involved. So it's a very broad-based contextual introduction that you can give. Next example is when you analyze the nature of major tribal uprising that took place in the various parts of India during 19th century. Now it's a very broad question. You can write anything in it. But I will try to contextualize it by saying that tribal movements have been mainstreamed into history by subaltern scholars who emphasize on history from below. So uprisings were a part of nationalistic movement. What I did was I just contextualized these movements as subaltern movements. Again, it is not something very unique. All you're doing is to provide a broader understanding to the exam. Mm, Again, I think you can see the other examples as well. But the basic understanding is to show the examiner कि आपको you can summarize the whole event into few lines. Then the second type of introduction is the historiographical introduction, where you actually try to incorporate the view of a historian, and then by incorporating that historian, you provide some kind of legitimacy to your answer. This is not my view, this is something that a historian has already said. So this provides first an anchor to the answer, and secondly, the examiner will know that you have read a lot about the historian and his arguments, right? So एक ये भी होता है, and especially when it's a debatable question, you can very well answer with historiographical introduction. When it's a debatable question, it becomes all the more relevant because क्योंकि वो debatable है, you have to give in the views of different historians, so it's better to start with it. So, for example, this was that American Revolution stands as a landmark. Now, the history of modern world in the history of modern world, the American Revolution stands as a significant landmark comment. Now, this was a question that is demanding. Now, it is demanding for you to understand the significance of American Revolution kya tha. And if I quote a scholar or a historian and I say that American Revolution was not just a political revolution but also an ideological one, which was his major argument, then I uh, directly hit the demand of the question. And secondly, I give a very authentic, legitimate argument, which is not mine, but of a very esteemed scholar. So this is something that you can do. Again, in 2023 and in 2024, I was doing a mistake that I was trying to use historiography a lot. And in using historiography a lot, you try to, it becomes very factual. So don't bombard the examiner with historiography, but try to फाइंड यूनिक वेज टू इंट्रोड्यूस. अगर आपने हिस्टोरियोग्राफी एक क्वेश्चन में यूज कर लिया है तो दूसरे में दूसरा इंट्रोडक्शन यूज करना, बट ट्राई टू mix and match your introduction, right? This was the second example. And historiography does not always mean कि you need to know the whole argument of the historian. I'll give an example. um, Recently, William Dalrymple had released a book, The Golden Road. Now, I did not have the time to read the full book. I had read some of its chapter, but I knew that if a question comes on ancient India and about India and its ties with Southeast Asia, I will use his argument in my introduction. So whenever there used to be a question on ancient India or Southeast Asia ka connection, I used to um, write the name of the scholar William Dalrymple and his book Golden Road. Now, it is not necessary that you read all the books, but if you have limited time, you can very well get a summary of it from ChatGPT. Anyway, this was just one way of doing it. Another way of using historiography was by directly quoting the book. So I had made a list of different books and famous ones, not the ones that are not very well known. At least the examiner should know the name of the book. So if the book is very famous or if the historian is very famous, you can very well make a list of it. So for ancient India, I had made a list कि अगर epigraphy में कोई question आता है or if there is any question on numismatics, so I had prepared a list of one or two books and historians. So, for example, in this question of importance of epigraphy, I had written that D.C. Sarkar and his book Indian Epigraphy, it highlights the importance of inscription in the age of ancient India. Now, this introduction does not very well, it's not very factual, but it's also something unique. Um, so, this is just one example that I gave about historiographical introduction. Be it book, be it the name of a scholar, or be it the argument that he's very famous for. Now, third type of introduction is quote-based introduction. This was one of the favorite kind of introductions that I used because quote-based introduction is a little bit poetic. It breaks the monotonous tone of the paper, right? ऐसा नहीं है कि आप बस factual answers लिखते हो. You also have an element of philosophy or poetic stance in your answers. So not just poetic, but also अगर आप किसी scholar का quote कर रहे हो, तो it becomes all the more relevant. Now, you don't have to exactly remember the quote, but even if you understand कि वो broadly क्या बोल रहे थे, that also works. ठीक है, तो फॉर एग्जाम्पल अगर बहुत फेमस टॉपिक्स है लाइक रेलवेज और some topics like American Revolution or Industrial Revolution. Now, these topics are bound to repeat and these are very famous topics. इस पे कोई ना कोई quote मिल ही जाएगा. So, for example, in Industrial Revolution, when we attended the crash course and we were discussing it with Nikhil sir. Nikhil sir also suggested a lot of quotes that we could use in the answers. So, for example, Industrial Revolution may, if a question comes on impact of Industrial Revolution, then there was a very famous quote of Charles Dickens that it was the best of the time and it was the worst of the times. So I had already noted down इतने सारे quotes. जहाँ भी notes बनाओ आप, just write a quote above the notes कि अगर इस पे आया, you can write it. It is not necessary. You don't have to go very far away to make the bank of the quote. Sometimes I use the previous year questions on. So इतने सारे PYQ है history के. If you pick it up, there will be at least 15-20 quotes that you will get from PYQ only. I'll give an example. For this Crimean War, a lot of times Crimean War को differently पूछा गया है. It was the Crimean War. It is said that Italian invasion took its birth in the mud of Crimea. This was the answer that I gave to this question. Crimean War provided Gabor with opportunity. Now, the quote that I used, mud of Crimea, it is already a PYQ. What I did was to reform and remold the PYQ quote in another question. तो keep a lookout कि अगर PYQ में बहुत एक अच्छा quote आ रहा है, you can use it in the next year's answer. ठीक है. For now, railways was a topic that I was expecting कि इस साल आएगा क्योंकि बहुत सालों से नहीं पूछा है. So I deliberately searched of a quote on railways and I used it in my mock papers as well. 1848 अगेन 1848 रेवोल्यूशन पे बहुत क्वेश्चन आ चुके हैं एंड one of it was code based question that 18 so I was saying that in 1848 revolution as well in previous year question there was a code based question that there was nothing in common in 1840 revolution except the date. Now this was a debatable question. You could say in in its favor and against it as well. But whatever it is, I kind of remolded that question and used as introduction in a different answer. So all I want to say कि जब भी आप PYQ पढ़ो तो keep a lookout on good words and quotes that you can replicate afterwards. Okay. The fourth type of introduction is chronological or comparative. Now, a lot of times, बहुत broad question आते हैं that asks you a lot of information that uh, that is like stretches from centuries. आप 9th to 12th century का भी they can ask a question, be it comparative or be it chronological कि इस era में क्या developments हुई or what was the evolution like. So whenever there is a question that asks you कि broadly आप evolution बताओ um, of centuries, then you can use a chronological way to answer the question. ठीक है, for example, अगर आप वैदिक एज का कुछ पूछ रहे हैं that includes from going from early Vedic to later Vedic, then show a full trajectory of the evolution. कि what were the factors that led to the evolution of this in the introduction. Or if they are asking कि मुगल एम्पायर के बारे में कोई क्वेश्चन पूछ रहे हैं, then you can very well compare that to the Delhi Sultanate. So what it is doing is it is setting a contextual basis for the chronology. Things in history do not happen in vacuum. तो अगर मुगल एम्पायर में कुछ हो रहा है तो then it might have seeds of it in Delhi Sultanate. And same with the whole ancient era as well. So whenever there is a phenomena that is happening in one era, make sure कि अगर आप connect कर सकते हो उसको previous era से, then that might be really useful. For example, this question, the post-Vedic age was a period of remarkable transformation, and in this context, briefly enumerate the important features of second organization. Now it is telling, the question itself is hinting you कि post-Vedic period में transformations हुए हैं. So transformation कैसे? As compared to the ones in Vedic. So when you want to give a chronological, then just say that, compare it with the previous ages. So I wrote that second urbanization took place in 6th century BC in Ganga Valley, and the rise of Mahajanpadas from the rural settlements of the Vedic era shows a transformative shift in the cultural outlook, in the human cultural outlook. Now it's a big introduction, you can shorten it as well, but the point was to show that sometimes you need to go back into the history of the question, go trace the development up till the previous era. तो थोड़ा वो context set हो जाता है. ठीक है, and I can use another example as well. For example, the land reform. Why did the demand for land reform never became an agenda in the national politics after 1947? So the question is asking you बाद का चीज, but you can very well contextualize the previous era as well. That land reform gained traction in the pre-independence movement when it was part of the Congress manifesto, yet it lost its zeal and luster in the post-independence era. Now you've shown the examiner कि ये phenomena नया नहीं था. It was something that it पूरी process थी. It was a part of a process. You show the changes and the continuity of the history, and then you tell कि subsequently it lost its luster because of the following factors. So you have embedded a part of curiosity in the examiner, and secondly, you have shown the examiner that there is it was a part of a process that started well before. I think I'm able to make sense of this chronological part. Okay, then we'll come to the fifth sort of introduction, which is source-based introduction. Source-based introduction is the most easy one. All you need to do is कि अगर कोई question पूछ रहा है कि किसी फिनोमेना किसी इवेंट के बारे में पूछ रहा है So you just tell how do you come to know about that event. And this telling the source to the examiner shows ki you know the authentic primary as well as secondary source. Once you do that, uh, it firstly short hota hai introduction if you use source, and secondly it tells the examiner that you know the historical importance of the source, and you have connected that with the question. So for example, agar kuch bhi question medieval India पे आता था, I used to quote Akbarnama, N. A. Akbari. Whenever you use such things, so it adds value to your answer. So I have already given some of the examples, like in the light of throw light on socio-economic conditions of India on the eve of invasions from Mahmud Ghazni and Mahmud Ghori. So you can very well say ki what was the account, what was the sources where we come to know about this. Once you've set this tone of introduction, then you can very well factual question hai, so you can answer it in the subsequent part. But telling the source adds value to your answer. Okay. Another kind of introduction is the current and context based introduction, like current affair based introduction. I know conclusion में वो ज़्यादा useful होता है, but in introduction as well it can be added. For example, अगर कोई भी question आता है archaeology पे, then you can use the example of the recent archaeological diggings that have been happening in Sinoli or somewhere else. You can quote that and introduce your answer with the recent happenings of this archaeological findings have become all the more prominent. So, agar koi bhi question hai, you don't have to give a very factual introduction. You can innovate, you can make them organic by making sure कि आप current context या current affair भी add कर दो history के question में especially. That will make your answers more dynamic. So I think this was all about the introduction part. Come to the conclusion part. ठीक है. So conclusion is like uh, ulta pyramid. Introduction you have to do very pinpoint करके. Introduction has to be like hitting the bullseye. But conclusion is totally opposite. Conclusion where you can give a very broad based understanding of the topic. Uh, so conclusion में पहले तो firstly you have to summarize the whole argument that you have done. Especially in 15-20 markers when your answer is so big, conclusion is something that the examiner switches to. वो सीधे 20 markers में he or she will read your conclusion कि बच्चे ने understand क्या किया है at the end. So in 15-20 markers, conclusion are all the more important. And secondly, conclusions need to be visionary. It needs to be forward looking. It needs to be uh, summarizing the whole argument. And sometimes it can be unique as well. I'll give some unique templates as well. But uh, basically, you have to give the idea to the examiner that I have given you a lot of perspective and factors, but in सबके बाद भी this is my opinion. You can very well give your own opinion in conclusions as well. ऐसा नहीं है that you have to stick to one opinion. Sometimes I used to give my own viewpoint of an event or of a phenomena in the conclusion. So ज्यादा इमोशनल नहीं होना है, ज्यादा रैडिकल ओपिनियंस नहीं देना है, but yeah, if it is practical, if it is rational, you can very well give your own opinion as well. Try to avoid it, but if you think that it is something that is practical, try to do it. So first type of conclusion is long term impact conclusion कि आप वो किसी के बारे में पूछ रहे हैं causes, consequences, but you also give the very very long term impact. जैसे अमेरिकन रेवोल्यूशन के बारे में हमने पूछा about even if they ask the causes, तो in conclusion you try to say that causes to multiple थे, but that led to long term impact like this. So what you are saying that एक इवेंट तो हो गया है, but in conclusion you say आगे इससे ये हुआ. So it tells the examiner that you have a very broad understanding of the timeline of the question, right? So I I haven't added the question, but I'll tell you कि this was a question on the nature of state of Mauryan era. The question was asking to debate upon the nature of state of Mauryan Empire. Now, to conclude such questions which are already debatable, it's very tough. Because when there are so many opinions, how can you conclude with one thing? So sometimes you have to give a very diplomatic, a balanced, a nuanced way to conclude your answer. So I just said that the nature of state remains ambiguous, as no one model can explain the phenomena, which was so complex and multi-layered. So the the beauty of history is that you cannot come to or jump to one conclusion. The conclusions will always be either you have to do more research on it, or the conclusions will be multi-layered and complex. तो आप ऐसे भी कर सकते हो. Don't have to pinpoint one view of historian. Now this second question was the impact of Battle of Panipat. No, the question asked something about Battle of Panipat, but the conclusion I did was that the ripple effects of Battle of Panipat went far away, but the significance remains symbolic, not substantial in the short term. Now I did say that Battle of Panipat was very important, but uh, the short term impact was symbolic, but long term it was substantial. Now this is something that was my personal view. I can write it very well. The view was not radical, but it made it summarize the whole answer in the conclusion. So long term impact में you can even show कि अगर कोई event है like French Revolution, the long term impact uh, in the conclusion can say that there was a quote of this very famous scholar, a Chinese scholar, who said that the impact of Chinese Revolution is something that we still have to see, or which is still has to be unraveled. So it's a very beautiful quote to show कि impact of French Revolution अभी भी दिख रहे हैं and it is still going on. So in such conclusions, you show the examiner that history has a long chain of continuity, and we still are witnessing the impacts. So this was one type of conclusion. Then second type of conclusion is historiographical. Again, like we discussed in the introduction, you can quote a viewpoint of a historian. Like in introduction, you can do it in the conclusion as well. For example, I had used J.F. Richards' argument of Battle of Panipat. He pointed out it was a turning point in history. So this kind of quotes or this kind of neutral viewpoint of historian very well summarizes the whole answer into one sentence. And second, this was a question of Gupta era, the role of political rulers in Gupta era. So I said that as Romila Thapar points out, Gupta era control diminished with the weak successor, leading to its downfall. So, although the question did not ask about the downfall of the Gupta, but in historiography, you can very well point out that Romila Thapar had said that this led to this. So, in conclusion, I made it future visionary, and I also pointed कि एक historian का नाम. So, this was about it. If you have a historiographical data, you can point it out in conclusion. This was the second type of the template. Third type of template is current context. Now this is something that I used the maximum of the times कि history का है, but अगर कोई present time में कोई government scheme है या अगर कोई भी development है which is happening right now, try to connect that to the present context. You can see the examples very well, that excavation of Kilidi in Tamil Nadu and Miranda. It shows that history is not static but ever evolving with time. So this was a question of, I think, archaeology or something. Secondly, अगर कोई importance based question है, like if they are asking me about, this was a question about Natya Shastra. And Natya Shastra was recently in news because UNESCO Memory of the World Register had incorporated it. So I knew कि वो question पूछा क्यों गया है. So in conclusion, I said कि this UNESCO Memory of the World Register has incorporated it recently, and this records will help in preserving and promoting our tradition as well. So basically shifting a little bit outwards history and connecting history to the present world and showing the importance of that historical event or phenomenon. Okay. Again, William Dalrymple's Golden Road, I had concluded with that. क्योंकि ये recent book है, recent work है, so you can connect it. Again, if there is any question about India's history, its democratic roots, जब से वो वैदिक एरा से लेकर अभी तक, you can very well show that हमारे traditions जो हैं, it was very well established in our past, and we can see the remnants of that in the present as well. So sometimes try to give a very futuristic and how the past जो हो चुकी चीज है वो आज को कैसे impact कर रही है. And we are also trying to be the Vishwa Guru given our historical tradition. So this was the third type of template where current context is being used. Now, fourth is balanced evaluation template. A lot of times, बहुत questions ऐसे रहते हैं where a lot of factors influence one event. बहुत सारी चीजें एक साथ होती है that leads to one event. There is no black and white in that question. Sometimes the question remains in the gray area. For that type of questions, you try to balance the all the factors and try to give a nuanced way. uh, History where, especially medieval history and modern history, there are a lot of phenomena where the question is debatable, but the question is also based on the context of history. I'll give you an example for this. Now, Gandhi ji had said do or die in the Quit India movement. Now, this was a very different stance that he took as compared to his previous Satyagraha stand. Now, historians see this view very differently. Some say that he was in a radical mood, some say that he had changed his perspective about Satyagraha and peaceful protest. So, a lot of different perspectives are there, but you always have to place history in the context of that era. We cannot judge the events of history sitting in the context of 21st century. So whatever happened in history, वो एक background में हो रहा था. Circumstances were shaping those decisions. So we have to recognize those circumstances as well. So that is why I wrote to sum up, Gandhiji's militant mood was an outcome of strategic need and political urgency. And he became the leader of a movement over which he had little control. I am not pinpointing one factor only कि इसीलिए गांधी जी ने ऐसा किया. I'm just telling कि it was the need of the circumstances of that era. It was also a political urgency, which is why he did that. Try to place the question in the historical circumstances, right? Uh, One way to balance it is that you also give the answer key. It was for example, a land reform में question था. So you just say that it was the circumstances of a nascent India as well as the political economic imperative that torpedoed that land reform agenda. तो जब भी एक कोई event होता है, a lot of factors result in it. तो बस ये बोल दो कि political, economic, social factors थे which led to this happening. Then again, I think the balance evaluation wala template is something that is very easy. You can incorporate it anywhere. You just have to show the different factors and the circumstances. Now, fifth kind of conclusion is cause-effect synthesis. Cause-effect synthesis basically ki if they're asking ki what were the causes of 1857 mutiny, then in conclusion, you tell about the effects of that 1857 mutiny on the future era of national movement. So it's a cause-effect synthesis. Now, I have given the example. Now, this question was asking me about 1905 Russian uprising in 1905, which happened. Now, question 1905 pe hai, but in conclusion, I will tell the effect of 1905, which was World War I further gave a push to what was unrealized in 1905, finally leading to 1917 Russian Revolution and abdication of Tsar. अगर कोई चीज मुझे पहले का पूछ रही है, मैं कंक्लूजन में उसका इफेक्ट बता दूंगी. That's a very simple template that you can use anywhere, and it also tries to show the examiner कि आपको आगे के era का भी पता है and आगे के era के happenings भी पता है. So it sets a very good tone, right? And the sixth template is cultural history template. If there is any question on the cultural art and culture based question, especially in ancient and medieval era, then I used to try to incorporate some beautiful words, yeah, some sentences that shows the importance of our culture. ठीक है तो also sometimes कि आपके cultural achievements, they are not a product of one era, they are a synthesis of a lot of influences. For example, अगर गंधारा मथुरा इन सब पे क्वेश्चन आता है, you can very well conclude कि these were not an outcome of one process, but it was a synthesis of a lot of regional influences, right? So जैसे मुगल आर्किटेक्चर पे क्वेश्चन था, you can conclude it by saying that it represents a synthesis of Persian, Timurid, and indigenous Indian tradition. So, although आपने आंसर में बहुत कुछ लिखा होगा, but in the end you're saying कि art is something that is a synthesis of lot of regional variation. तो examiner को पता चल गया that you have understood the evolution of art. ठीक है? Now, this was also a question on Gupta era's art and architectural achievements. Now, how do we conclude a topic which is so factual? मतलब गुप्ता आर्ट पे उनने पूछा है, but I will try to conclude Gupta art question with something that connects it to the future era. So I said that Gupta art has been inscribed in history as an epoch of artistic development, and it continued to inspire artists like Nandlal Bose and Rabindranath Tagore. Now, this is something that the examiner might not read a lot of times in the answer sheets. Nahi log, this is not a very common conclusion, but I will tell the examiner कि cultural history पहली बात तो synthesis of a lot of things है. It's a achievement of India in itself, and secondly, उस गुप्ता era का importance, significance, it is still reflected in the artists of today. Again, trying to stretch the argument up till the present times, and also telling कि a lot of factors go into the synthesis of art. So this is just one example. You can use multiple other words and sentences as well. Now, national movement template. Modern India में बहुत सारे question national movement पे आएंगे. Whenever you have to analyze a national movement, you don't have to give one-sided information कि बस achievements बता दिए. You have to critically analyze it, and hence जब भी आप limitations बताओ किसी भी national movement leader या event का, तो you have to incorporate कि कैसे उस weaknesses थे, but we still overcome it, and we still tried to focus on the benefits of it. तो अगर स्वदेशी मूवमेंट पे आ रहा है क्वेश्चन, तो in conclusion just say that despite its urban limitations, the Swadeshi movement expanded the political participation and nationalist consciousness. Don't dismiss the limitations. You will be seen as a very biased person. So if there are any limitation, in conclusion as well, recognize those limitation by just saying that despite the limitations, this significantly expanded, or this significantly helped us in the future movements. So recognize the limitations and also show the examiner कि उसके advantages क्या. Now this is a national movement template that you can use anywhere in any movement possible. Then the eighth template is the importance of the source. अगर कोई question ancient India में comes on the source um, of the archaeology या sources पे literature पे कोई question आता है या archaeology और coinage, numismatics, epigraphy, source पे अगर कोई भी question आता है, तो at the end you write कि वो source it is very important because it provides a window into the historical uh, events of our history, right? तो जैसे सूफी लिटरेचर पे एक क्वेश्चन था तो सूफी लिटरेचर पे मैंने एक दो पेज लिख दिए, but to conclude, I said that the Sufi literature can be analyzed for extracting the embedded history and getting a nuanced view of medieval India. So basically, concluding it with telling that it's a very important source which has to be scientifically analyzed and it has to be corroborated with other sources and then coming to a conclusion. तो वो जो synthesis and anti-synthesis अपन पढ़ते हैं in world history, you have to do it in conclusion as well. कि you have shown every factor, but uska the Sufi literature, for example, it is important for extracting the embedded history and getting a nuanced view. Now, this conclusion does not require you to have extra knowledge, yeah, something extra, but you are just beautifying your words here and there and trying to conclude on a good point. So again, conclusions are not always value additionary, but sometimes all you have to do is play with words and try to give a balanced view. I think that's it of the conclusion as well. Uh, Most of it I have covered, but again, these are not just the 5 to 8 templates that you can use. There are a lot of templates. These are something that I built, but I would recommend कि आप इसके आगे भी जाके for every theme you try to prepare something, introduction के लिए भी, conclusion के लिए भी. The more you prepare and think कि अगर if you brainstorm कि अगर ये question आया तो how will I introduce and conclude, the more you think about it, the more time you will save in the actual examination. So do think whenever you come across a question, brainstorm about the introduction and conclusion, and then brainstorm about the uh, points that you will write. But yes, just like in essay, जब बोलते हैं essay में introduction conclusion बहुत important होता है, वैसे ही history के answers में भी it is equally important. So all I want you to do is to brainstorm your own types of templates, and then once you get the hang of it, you will try to innovate a lot. So I think that was all about it.